focus on the politics of gender and LGBTIQ plus rights, the consequences of gendered organizational cultures across different institutions, from parliaments and political parties to academia, and the role of conservative and far-right actors in shaping societal polarization around gender-based issues. Francesca is currently working as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Bergen within an ERC-funded project called Success, Gender Gap in Political Endurance. And as part of the Success team, she works on the gendered causes and consequences of parliamentary seniority, which is what she will be presenting today. She also currently co-convenes the Standing Group on Gender and Politics of the Italian Political Science Association with Anna Lavezzari, and co-edits the ECPR Loop series blog on gender and democracy with our colleague Paloma Caravantes. So, Francesca, whenever you want, you have the floor.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Lucrezia, for the kind introduction. I'm actually very happy to be here and present this work. I have a couple of disclaimers before we start. There won't be any analysis of empirical analysis because what we are going to present today is actually a pre-analysis plan. So bear with me, but actually I would like to kind of, very much stress this point because you kind of have a bit of a good responsibility because we are going to go in the field with this experiment next week, starting on the 12th of March. So this is pretty much the very last occasion that we have to get feedback on what we have been working on, thinking on, and written down also in the pre-analysis plan. So take this in mind. We will very much appreciate any feedback and any comment coming from you. As Lucrezia mentioned, I'm part of the Success ERC, an ERC consolidator grant called Success. We look, as Lucrezia said, mainly at causes and consequences of gendered mechanism of political seniority. We conceptualize parliamentary seniorities as having 3 mandates in parliament. So, and what we noticed empirically is basically that while very often when we look, especially at Western, let me give you like a little bit of the gist of what the project is about. What we noticed is that even though in especially Western democracy, gender balance in parliament and parliamentary descriptive representation has gone up, whenever we focus on actually leadership position in parliament and in a way profiles and figures within parliamentary life, ministerial lives, and so on and so on, that actually hold political power. We're talking about president of committees and so on and so forth, so you can make an idea for yourself of what it is. Actually, gender gaps go down dramatically. Women tend to stay in parliament much less with shorter careers, and they also tend to not occupy those positions of power. So, of course, this kind of create a bit of a democratic dilemma. We talk about increasing gender balance, but what if, in a way, patriarchal power in political institutions continue to have, and keep the upper hand. So this is what we are mostly interested in the project. The project is a fully mixed method project. We have gathered data on levels of political seniority across more than 28 EU countries, other areas, so global south and so on. And this is something that is in the workings. And we have conducted field work, mostly like political interviews with political elites and parliamentarians in 5 different countries, including authoritarian countries, namely Algeria, and the other countries are France, Italy, UK, Norway. And that's it, I guess. Yeah. So, so this is just to give you a bit of the broader overview of what we are doing today. As we are moving basically in the last year of the project, we have moved to like the last working package that has been long awaited, and we are going to starting on this, trying to understand what are the consequences of political seniority and its gendered mechanism when we goes to basically political public opinion, right? So how citizens and voters evaluate political seniority. So what we are presenting today is what I'm presenting today is this pre-analysis plan. We're mostly interested in understanding gendered voter evaluations of senior politicians. So again, maybe I will repeat myself a little bit, but what we know is that women remains underrepresented in senior political roles, as I said, despite improved gender parity at the entry levels, even in gender equal context. This was something that we were actually very surprised to prove empirically. And when we look at kind of current explanations for gender gaps in political representation, descriptive representation. We usually use like a very, very acknowledged framework dividing between, okay, supply side factors and demand side factors for gender inequality in representation. Supply side research tend to stress the impact or the role of individual level factors for explaining gender inequality and like unequal descriptive representation, and mainly this trend of research point to the kind of, you know, in a way, women's like willingness or lack of willingness to continue in office, to enter and compete for political office, and so on and so forth, and also like lack of political ambitions and motivations. And this is mostly, I would like to stress, I mean, this is kind of my opinion probably on that, but it's mostly like a US-based literature. So in that type of context, this type of explanation have received a lot of attention. The other on the other side, I mean, the other strand of literature that look at gender inequalities in politics kind of stress or overemphasize the role of demand side factors. As we know, especially coming from feminist institutionalist literature and so on, actually institutions, meaning electoral system, but mostly organization, political parties, then have a very strong role in kind of reproducing gendered orders in politics, especially, as I said, in a way, parties, so political parties play a main role in that. As we know, in most, democratic systems, political parties have this very, very strong or crucial function of being gatekeepers to the political arena through party selection mechanism and so on and so forth. They clearly have a final say on who gets to political office, right? And then through this, we know that this mechanism and party gatekeeping is very much gendered. So, and these have a strong impact on women's political career trajectory, obviously. In addition to that, and this is basically where we get, I mean, demand side explanation also try to take into account how actually political party makes sense of potentially voters' cues vis-a-vis what is it like the preferred candidates or preferred politician that voters and citizens would like to see in political arenas, right? And this is mainly what we are going also with our work. We are looking especially at this literature. So there are two things to be said. First of all, like there is a large strand of the literature based on experimental studies, so using survey experiments and so on, that actually finds that there is really not systematic penalty against women in office, and even sometimes some studies even show like a small kind of statistically speaking small pro-women bias, which is also called very often in the like psychology or social psychology literature is called the women are great effect. So in a way, voters and voters and citizens, they tend to like women more than they like men, and this is a general trend. This type of results, so like a pro-women bias, which is somehow a bit counterintuitively if we think about, of course, persistence of gendered bias in population and so on and so forth. But this is what we find in observational, in experimental studies. Whereas when we move to observational evidence, so not using survey experiment, but simply kind of survey data, we actually have a bit more mixed results, no? So what we know from many studies here, the kind of citations and quotes are just not many, but of course the literature is much vaster. It was just exemplary for now. We know that women face very often like a qualification gap for which, like all things equals, basically, they need to be more and more qualified compared to the main counterparts in order to get the same level of approval, for example, right? So, and here we see a lot of this. Also, all the observational evidence is a bit more mixed also because we know that also gender and gender identity in a way interact very often with gender traits. So how, in a way, like the gender performativity of candidates, right? So, and these are gender traits, it's a literature that it's a kind of box where a lot of stereotypical thinking and behavior still take place. And then, so that's kind of the, to sum up, we know that observational evidence, the results are more contradictory, depending a lot on the context in which surveys were filed and so on and so forth, and also that there is a lot of variation over time. So while studies and older studies, maybe conducted in the 80s and 90s, actually show that women are penalized by voters this is not a trend that is kind of traveling in time too much. The point is, and that's where we come in, or we try, is that more studies, first and foremost, they mostly focus on electoral candidates. So there is this element of trying to assess this type of favorability of candidates in the context of electoral campaigns, right? This means that there is no real, differentiation between potential difference that may arise in voter thinking or thinking process in evaluating mid-career politician or senior politician. And of course, since our project is on seniority, this is pretty much what we are interested in, right? So we know very little about how voters evaluate senior politician, or, senior politician. We know something about, for example, ministerial post, but this is kind of a conceptually different track compared to simply representational work in parliament, which is mostly what we are interested in. And whether gendered and gender traits, so gender behaviors, interact with seniority-related traits. And this is where, with this conjoint experiment that I will slowly introduce, this is the type of area in which we are trying to tap in with our studies. Let me go through quickly through the literature on what we know about desirable traits for senior political roles. So the literature on seniority, which is also, now we are also starting publishing also from our own data. So some of the things are coming actually from our empirical evidence and prior empirical evidence that we have collected. We know that attributes associated very often with competence, experience, leadership skills, and in a way decisiveness or authoritativeness, these are traits that voters on average pretty much like for occupying those positions of power within the political realm, which in a way makes sense. You want competent people, right? And another trait that is very often emphasized is that actually independent from party elites, so having like a very specific in a way or independent political profile, this is something that is also positively evaluated. Now, among the politicians, so not among the voters, but among, in a way, politicians, party elites, and so on and so forth, we also know that seniority, age, so kind of being a bit older than compared to younger, and are rewarded as characteristics because they kind of signal, they are a proxy basically for competence and accumulated political experience. And this is, of course, something that political parties pretty much like whenever especially you are electing or thinking to re-elect people that need to then end up in political office. And so those are traits that we know are in a way desirable or perhaps kind of would create like a positive evaluation, right, on the side of citizens. We also know that, of course, many of these desirable traits have a kind of a masculine undertone, let's call it this way. In the sense that they are often coded or assigned more easily to men compared to women because of gender socializations and everything that I'm not going to even open here. But this is, of course, like the debates in which we're moving in. So the literature show that women very often face expectations about or are questioned more about their own competence compared to men, as I was mentioning before. So they are very often, they need to be twice as good to be equally evaluated by voters. And we also know that there is a sort of double bind. So it's in order for women candidates and for women politicians in which they need to serve or try to find like the sweet spot between performing masculine traits or like having like gender behavior that goes in that direction. So performing authority and so on without losing the other like more feminine norms. So that's in a way there is literature that shows that this is something that very often can create additional bias against women politicians or women candidates. Okay, but there is also some evidence that first of all this bias have declined over time, also thanks to the change in a way like gendered societal norms and so on. And actually voters tend to respond particularly positively to women who display traits that are associated with a very effective leadership and so authoritative traits and so on. And in a way, this trait is also associated with women in the population, so as citizens, as voters, as politicians, and so on, as a whole, in a way stepping out of very stereotypical gender-conforming behavior. So this is kind of the effect of societal change on these dynamics. So we take this kind of situation, or in a way that is a bit in flux, as our starting point for our argument. Yeah. And so we want to try to hypothesize somehow that women, and especially women that are, so women basically may receive like a premium. This is how we are calling this at the moment, like we are trying to think about like a gender premiums logic, when they possess or display traits that are widely perceived as desirable for senior political role, even though they go a little bit against gender stereotypical trait. So instead of being penalized for countertypical behavior, stereotypical behavior, female politicians who signal seniority, so who signal competence and hold in a way those desirable traits that I mentioned before, such as independence, assertiveness, and so on, will be evaluated positively related to their male counterparts at the same level, right? So in other words, what we are trying to argue, or this is where our theoretical argument is going for, probably, gender undesirable candidate traits may interact in a way that advantage women at higher level of the political careers. So this is kind of our argument for now. I'm very much looking for your comment on this. And so we have created for our pre-analysis plan 2 sets of hypotheses. I know, like, H1 is in red because it's exactly the contrary of what I just said, but I know, and we are aware of that, because we have a set of general hypotheses and we have a set of gendered hypotheses. So let me guide you through this. So as general non-gendered hypotheses, our hypotheses are confirmatory and directional. This is what we expect. We would expect that, of course, on average and overall, men will be evaluated more positively than women. This is a general rule. And that senior politicians are usually evaluated more positively than junior politicians, especially for high-level, top-level office positions. That elders are favored compared to younger politicians. Of course, seniority and age very much interact. And that, as I said before, independent and assertive politicians are usually considered more positively than loyal and consensual. And then we move to our gendered assumption. And let me kind of expect a little bit, like we try to think about how we could order and rank different type of profiles. According to the previous logic, gendered logic that I just explained, what we try to, in a way, or like what we expect is that whenever female politicians, so the profiles that we will present in the experiment, actually hold those desirable traits that I have previously mentioned, they will be preferred to men who hold those desirable traits. And then there is something that is kind of flipping. I mean, we're not gonna, we can do the analysis also for the end of our ranking order, but we are mostly interested in these 2 positions, let's say. But instead, when men and women don't have those desirable traits in the eyes of voters, men will still be prioritized compared to female. So this is our general hypothesis. And of course, then we repeat all this kind of substituting the desirable traits with all the traits that we have in our conjoint experiment, which means, as I said, we know that seniority is a desirable trait, so we would expect that female seniors are preferred to men seniors, and men seniors are preferred to male juniors, and then women junior politicians are actually at the very top, at the very bottom of the preference ranking. And we do the same with age, so it's kind of the same logic for all the desirable traits that we are testing in the experiments, party independent. So it is exactly the same logic. So this is kind of the mechanism that we are trying to test. How do we do that? Any questions so far? Can you hear me at the very end of the? Okay, good. Yes.
Why are you starting from a clear preference if you've just said that the literature mostly says that there is no difference.
Because we don't really know, and we are doing an experimental studies, so we know that in experimental studies there tend to be like a women positive bias,
but
right?
that is the opposite to what you would be saying for the non-trade
But because
rank order.
yes, but we expect that exactly. So like our argument is kind of like it cuts a little bit in between, right? So we expect the like gender premium logic to function when women actually hold this.
So only when,
yes, and when they don't hold the desirable traits, and the comparison is between men and women who don't hold those desirable traits, in a way we go back to the usual scheme in which women are not necessarily, actually they are usually affected by bias. The thing is that it's I understand the point, but that's exactly a bit the problem that we faced while thinking about it, is that there is not exactly clear evidence. So we are making a bit of a bet in the fact that this will be the type of mechanism that we find. And let me get to the end of the presentation, because this is just the beginning. It's a test study. We are going to replicate this experiment later on in a comparative also design. So for now, it's just one case study. But thanks for the question, because it's actually useful. So I'm not sure whether I can convince you with that, but that's where
I'm skeptical, but I understand why you've decided to do that.
Yeah.
Which was my own.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. So how are we going to test all these beautiful hypotheses? Definitely way too many to remember all of them, with a conjoint experiment. And we wanted to do a visual conjoint experiment. After lengthy discussion with my colleagues, we decided not to. I will take questions on this. I'm not going to say why now. And in this conjoint experiment, we are going to present exactly like respondents with two profiles that differs across 7 attributes. All these 7 attributes have, 6 of them have 2 levels. The last one has 4, but I will show you in a table in a moment. And this is going to be like one task that each respondent of the Norwegian citizen panel will have to do. We are not going to have respondents repeating task, because we actually have the entire sample of the Norwegian citizens responding, mainly 12,000 responded, which is actually like that was we decided to opt it like to structure it like that, instead of having a respondent repeating the task. And if you have any thought about it, like from a methodological perspective, I'm happy to take them. These are our attributes. And so, of course, our main output of interest, being gender, obviously. We will distinguish between the age, so having like younger profiles or like older politicians. So we vary its age, we vary its party affiliation, which is kind of new. I didn't talk about party affiliation before, but I will explain why we added that, mainly for issues and concern of external validity. Then we have, of course, we vary seniority, which is our second, in a way, dimension of interest for us. Then we have operationalized party loyalty according to these 2 statements, and also personality traits, as you can say. So we are basically kind of comparing confident and decisive politicians with others that are more approachable and caring. So of course, this is where the whole gender stereotypical behavior and comes in. And then we also have like a last dimension. This is also mostly for external validity, in which we are actually, in a way, priming the vote, like showing the respondents which type of political interest this politician have. As you can notice, there are some very specific gendered options, in the sense that some of our profiles will be mostly coded as being interested in having a feminist agenda, or like a soft feminist agenda, as I proposed to my co-author, but we're not very happy about the soft, but yeah. And others instead are more like other type of issues, so more redistributions and other type of political agendas. So why, of course, the choice of the attribute is mostly guided by the theoretical framework that I try to explain, and our way of like our arguments and also internal and external validity considerations, especially for what concern exactly party affiliation and the most important issues. This is basically to make the profiles of the two politicians in the conjoint vignette a bit more credible, because otherwise, especially for what concern party affiliation, we are comparing. This is Norwegian context, right? So we have the Labour Party on the one side and the Conservative Party on the other side. This was a choice that was a bit discussed. We know that, for example, far-right parties are particularly numerous now in parliament, so they are the biggest actually represented force in the Norwegian parliament as of now, but they haven't been for a long time, so it would be difficult and very, in a way unreal to have respondent evaluating like a very senior politician from the Progress Party, because there is not such a thing, right? So our choice of kind of just limiting us to a like main Social Democratic Party and the main kind of Conservative Party on the side of the spectrum, even though Norway is a very populated multi-party system, comes from that type of reasoning behind. I'm happy to speak about it more in the Q&A if you have any question. And then how we are, like our outcome measures are two. We have a very stereotypic, like kind of orderly way of measuring for conjoint experiment. So we are kind of asking them to choose between the preferred profiles. We have two outcomes. One is for like so the president of the Storting will be the president of the parliament. So we have a main legislative role and a main ministerial role, because we also know that, of course, there are differences. So we want to make sure that there is no so political power and positions of power are maybe systematically varying across legislative competence and governmental competence. Since we don't know, we have both measures here. I see Alejandro writing. Should I? Can I? Yeah. Okay. And so this is our outcome measure. So this is what we are, how we are measuring the effects of our vignette and then testing our hypothesis. And then we also try to add like a step on, trying to clarify a little bit the mechanism behind the outcome variables now. And I have to clarify why this is in red. Unfortunately, we just realized yesterday morning, so that's a bit of a last minute modification. And this is something that, I mean, I would really like to ask your thoughts openly about that. We have to cut we were like 1 minute long in the survey, so we had to cut some of the questions. We were trying to explore two different mechanisms, one about competence and one about representativeness. So like whether these profiles are most fitting for or perceived as more effective, and this is why the seniority and gender interact. But we have to cut the part on the competence, which is like that was measured with this like with this outcome basically like post-treatment questions, and we are only taking or keeping in the survey the representational aspect. So after the vignette, after they have done the first choice between the preferred profile, we are presenting them another question in which we ask a respondent to evaluate individually, so separately, not in a comparative manner, but like separately the two profiles, to express whether they feel like that those profiles are more in a way fitting to represent people like them. So we are trying to tap into the representation, the representational aspect of, in a way, ordered preferences and like preference order and so on. Yeah, so this is something that I would really like to have advice on, because it was a very last minute cut, and yeah, it would be nice to have some opinion about that. Question about this, because it's also, yeah, yes.
For those questions, because you say 5 name of profile A and 5 name of profile B, you're only providing the name, you're not showing again the whole profile?
This comes in the interface. They are basically, no, we are not showing again.
The whole profile again. So
no, actually, so basically this type of table stays kind of.
Oh, so it stays and then you have
to stay, and then the three.
So it's just the name.
No. The two outcome variables, and then the representativeness questions comes later while the vignettes stay fixed. So they always have a reference to what they are asked for. Yes. So this is how we coded it in Qualtrics. Yes. Okay. if you want, I can, but probably this is a bit tedious, but so we have decided to randomize the names of the politicians. So we are including 10 different names for men and female politicians, for men and women politicians, just to make sure that there is no any like unwanted cues coming together with the names. We know that, of course, names are never neutral. So we kind of conducted like behavioral interviews in order to make sure that our selection of names was not suggesting any class belonging, ethnical, like belonging to minorities. We are in the Norwegian context, so of course the name that we chose are very Norwegian, especially for me. They kind of sounded all the same, but of course, luckily we had like people to conduct the behavioral interviews that were from the subsample of the respondents. So they were citizens that were like, in a way, we run the pretest. So in a way, we are not going to have any post question in the survey, but we kind of try to solve this issue simply by running these behavioral interviews. And then we also managed to, basically we constructed for what concerned the age variables, we did it in a very dynamic way. So it's like the two age range that are presented, like the age range that are presented in the profile, they are based on the actual composition of Norwegian parliament at the moment. My co-author really stressed that I had to say that, so I'm saying this. Okay, and then of course we have at the end, we are also testing apart our confirmatory hypothesis, a bunch of exploratory hypotheses in which we basically will run, whenever we have the data, heterogeneity effects and heterogeneous effects for both attributes interactions between the attributes of the conjoint itself and of course subgroup dynamics. But this is pretty standard, I would say. Last point, because I think I've gone way too long, is that the future steps. So this is going to be like a study that is embedded in the Norwegian Citizen Panel that is run by the department in which I work. But the program and the project is to have this first on only Norwegian based, and then move into a design in which we will have a visual comparative conjoint experiment with Norway and 3 other countries that we are actually, we haven't done this case selection yet because we are doing like a theoretically driven case selection in which we would like to file this conjoint experiment in countries that actually varies according to gender equality, gender balance in parliament and seniority balance in parliament. So we are still working on that, but stay tuned. I hope it wasn't too boring, and thank you very much for the attention.